majority of council to be 7. And it wasn't a tie. The president of council did not break the tie. And therefore we let it pass. We had a majority. This one on. So when you vote, you abstain, you're not counted in the vote. So the problem with this is, let's give an example. Honestly, so 3 of us are absent. 2 people abstain from the vote. 4 vote yes, 3 vote no. Under this rule for an informal passes. It passes with 33% of houses. Informals tend not to be a big deal. However, we also changed the way that we do purchases, which is at below a certain threshold, administration, like official or the appointed lawyers can buy something. But once it gets between, I think it's 50 and maybe something like that, it has to come to city council for an informal resolution approval, which means that an expenditure of funds could happen well below a 50%.
I never liked that from the get-go.
Voting on the...
No, I never did not like passing anything of expenditure of funds on an informal resolution for multiple reasons. Okay, one, Bill Schmuggler can sit down here and say, I sponsored more legislation than anybody else ever did down here. No shit, because you're down as a sponsor of the informal resolutions on every expenditure. Right. Doesn't mean he did a damn thing. It just means that his name was on the legislation. I don't like an informal resolution spending that kind of money.
Well, that isn't what we're talking about. That's not our fault.
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about a majority present versus
majority.
or majority.
What we should say is that what we would do, okay, under our thought process, is go back to how it was before we had that debacle. And how it was the same way you do everything else. A majority of council, which is 7 people.
Right. Back when we had that debacle, okay, it was actually Alan ruled majority voting. That's the way he saw it. That's
It was a 6-5, but it didn't need the...
No, they
Must have been 8%.
No, they changed it.
Yeah, right. We had 4 less eventually backed away from it, and we became majority at the right time. So we voted 6-5. So I would say, yeah.
Well, my question is, then you can't pass something if we don't have a 7.
Yeah, you need 7.
So what happens if this is something that's, kind of an emergency or something?
Well, then
There's still, it shouldn't be a formal resolution, it's an emergency, you know what I'm saying?
it wouldn't be. If it's an emergency, it won't be.
Okay.
But the other thing is, and this is something that we've kind of talked about a few times, I've talked about, if we can't come to a consensus on something that's important, with 7 members, okay, that fails. And maybe it should. You know what I'm saying? If we can't come to an agreement, and if we can't work together, to come to an agreement, because right now, if you don't have 7, it simply doesn't pass. And you might have to come back at it again. You may have to work at it. So anyway, as it is now, it's just whoever's present, and it's the majority. And before we spent money this way, because we didn't use them. All it was little stuff like somebody congratulations, or our organizational meeting, which was quite important.
Yeah.
But we never spent money, but now we do. So to allow us to do that with what could be a very small fraction of approval, we just think is bad policy. It's not legal, but it's bad policy. So, we wanted to throw that out there for discussion about what people thought about going back to what the rule was originally, before we had a problem with someone who shall remain nameless, who kept the name for no good reason, and I wanted to shake him to his teeth rattled, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen.
In the
So
rule,
what do you do if that happens again?
well, so
We have to work. We have to work it out.
the rule came about after the fix happened, which was you and Tom worked through it and Tom backed out. Right. And we became majority.
Yes.
So at the time, it seemed like
It did work.
a big problem, but it did work
They
out.
worked out.
Right.
They worked.
And that would be the only, of the informals, the only thing that would have to pass that would be informal would be leadership of council. And you could make a strong argument
membership, the majority here, because what's the phrase?
Even if they abstain, you still have.
You still get seven.
So,
I think Alan, we had done that. He called six in the majority.
You did.
yeah,
Right.
which,
Majority of votes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where it
That's what
came
he
where,
considered.
yeah,
Right.
but clearly that, but it was,
Which it was.
well,
Well, I mean, I'm just saying it wasn't
what he
57.
what he used to say was the majority of council. We define majority of council.
But we had
In here,
seven.
We always say, you know, we have it right at the rule.
so it's for the formal resolution. It outlines, there's a vote to approve the formal resolution.
Okay, so let's roll back into parliamentary procedure.
This is exactly what the work session is.
Right, what does Robert's Rule of Village say when it comes to parliamentary procedure on it?
We should have followed our rules. Our rules say what the majority of council is, and that's what it used to say.
Right.
Is seven.
So,
And it has the numbers all spelled out because it says in Rule 40, majority of members, 7 votes. Okay? 2/3 members, 8 votes. 3/4 members, 9 votes. 3/5 members, 8 votes. So it actually, you know, is pretty much outlined in there. But there was a little bit of wiggle room because he was like, well, that says votes required for passing of ordinances and formal resolution. But our old rule still said the majority of council, which is so. But hey, you know, had to get out of a tough situation and it worked and all of that. But that's what we have, and I think the reason that Mariel and I just things have changed now. We spend money that way, which is a lot different than what we used to use.
Which,
But
That's what they say.
you know,
Not,
now it says members present.
yeah,
So now, if you had a bunch of people absent,
but the only thing that can pass with less than 7 is an informal. All formal resolution, I think that's a power of my code, right? So the carve out was specifically for informals because they are non-binding.
but
Now it's
yeah.
not.
People now need to-
Yeah.
yeah.
Before it was like, that's a little weird, but now that we're spending money. And that's a side note from your point of whether that's a good policy or not, but as long as it is a policy, should informals be required? Should they require 7 votes? All votes require 7 votes. Or 6 for the president.
Yeah, 6/6. If I, so choose, if I don't, then it fails. Because you have to stop.
is one. So Rule 21. Rule 21 is submission of agenda items. This is specifically pertaining to Section C, receive and file communications. So communications, essentially receive and file communication, correctly if I summarize this wrong. If something wanted needs to be communicated or shared, but it's not going to be voted on, legislation is not going to be drafted, that is considered a receive and file, correct?
Right, and then communications that are gonna, well, all communications, I mean, they're all received and filed, and there's just some that then become, become actual resolutions or ordinances.
So currently, Rule 21, Section C reads, communications which will be designated as received and filed may be submitted for inclusion on the agenda by any person. So I suspect, because Rule 21, Section A outlines those who can submit formal resolutions and ordinances, originally outlined as, I don't know what the original language was, but it was narrow. It was council members, president, council, mayor, law director, auditor, treasurer, I think director of public service, and director of
And
public
those
safety.
are all listed in A, you see all the people. And we actually expanded that,
We
we
did.
realized we forgot some people.
We didn't have civil service director,
Yeah.
we didn't have court administrators, so people who regularly submit stuff was not outlined in there.
So we already fixed that part.
But Section C does not doesn't say communication shall be designated as received and filed, which will be designated as received and filed, may be submitted for inclusion on the agenda by any person listed in Section A. It says any person. So it could be read as any person can submit communications. And there's no limit.
And it's actually been kind of a problem because there was, some appointing authorities were like, wait a minute, no, you're not supposed to submit this. And there was some ballyhoo about the top people should be submitting these, not.
So we're just cleaning it up under the
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
what we would want to do
Refer back
is
to.
refer it back to Section A, or if they have permission of their appointing authority, then they could submit a communication. But it should only be the higher ups submitting those things, and there was a little bit of a kerfuffle. Kerfuffle, do you like that? Kerfuffle. There was a little bit of a thing, somebody submitted, and I didn't, and their appointing authority didn't know they submitted. So we just want to clean it up. It should have probably been cleaned up when we scanned it, I think. But so what we would do is say, put it on the agenda as set forth in Section A, or another person if they are granted permission by their appointing authority. So if under period decided, I want to have a communication submitted by the chief, for example, then just throwing it out, that could happen. If the mayor said, I do want somebody under my authority to submit the communication and not one of these listed people, he could do that. Otherwise, they aren't going to be able to just go off the reservation. Just a little cleanup, and I don't think much of anything would change.
Issues with that? No. It's easy. That's the logic. Okay. So let's move on to 15. Section E. 15 is public speaks. Section E. I'll let the president do this. Section E is shall observe all rules of decorum as prescribed in Robert's Rules of Orders, but debate, disrespect, or obscenity shall be tolerated, and the presiding officer shall rule any such individual.
A couple things that we'd like to sort of clarify in this. What I would like to see, and I staff point, is that I think we should add racial slurs to some of these other things that we would not want to see. And I think too, the way that we actually do it is probably correct, but I would like to clarify it in the rules that, debate, disrespect, obscenities, I'd like to have racial slurs that affect the decorum
next one, still on Rule 15. This has to do with, let's do section, we'll do section C. So section C, the language there, citizens desiring to speak at public speech shall sign up with a clerk or clerk of council by 6:45 p.m. on the evening of any regular council meeting on a first-come, first-served basis, except that persons who have spoken during any of the preceding 4 meetings will speak last after all other speakers. So, the first time that I did fill in for President Bates, I went through the rules. I tried to do this. This is a nearly impossible thing to do because you've got 15 minutes between when you get the sheet of public speaks and the meeting starts. You have 4. You have to go back now 4 minutes. You have to match up. Make sure you can read the names. Match it up, and then you are jumping around in the order. So
We never did it.
we've never done it before. No.
We don't enforce that.
So we never enforced it. I tried to. The concern is you can very easily miss something because you're going back and forth. It doesn't prescribe the order in which you then move. It's not chronological. It's just, I think that the idea behind this was to allow somebody who has a comment to speak. To be able to speak first and be able to be heard. But this is a unworkable rule, and it shouldn't.
I disagree.
We've never enforced it once.
Yeah, but I disagree that it's not enforceable, because last meeting, Roger Gates spoke, the meeting before that, Vicky Putney spoke, the meeting before that, Kim Bell spoke. I can tell you who spoke first at every meeting, the last 5 meetings. So it's not impossible to enforce that.
It's not so much about knowing the stuff. It's about, all right, let's say you have 2 sheets. So you got, I don't know how many total sheets. Let's say you got 13 speakers. And you have 2 people back that did not speak on or did. And you have 4 or 5 people in front. So you have to mark them. So I mark them on the sheet. And then you have to go down and go to the sheet. And you're jumping around. And the same markings that I used, same markings I used to identify that this person spoke last week and that they're not in this order. The same markings that I was using to check mark off that this person spoke. So then I was in a scenario where you've got a bunch of speakers, and I don't know who I marked as someone who spoke and someone listening, or who I marked that they need to go last after everyone else spoke. Because it's been previously.
Because it's, let's say there's 6 speakers that spoke last time. So what order should they go in? It is possible.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's not
It's
possible.
possible.
It is possible.
It's possible to do. It's
But we haven't done it, is the question, and we'll get to some other thoughts, is there a better way to ensure that people who haven't spoken get to be heard, and people who get to speak regularly would not have, that these people that come once a year, to be heard, would be able to be heard before people that come all the time. So, but you're right, it could be done. We talked about it, we haven't done it.
verbiage from every week to every 4 meetings, section B.
We should have done this years ago, Dick Drake kept coming down and talking about trees, and listen to whatever you talk about. However, I can remember 2 of our colleagues were writers at public speaks, Mr. Scaglione over there. We Yeah.
You know, and the commission, you know, allows. But, so there were two other thoughts, but now that isn't something, so to you go, man, you don't like that, okay? Those were taken from other cities, there were other thoughts.
Yeah, so section 8. Section 8 currently says that public speaks portion of the agenda shall be dedicated to allowing the public to have the privilege to speak on issues pertaining to city business at each regular council meeting. City business is, because it's a hard one to enforce. So, again, it would be changing the word issues pertaining to city business in each regular council meeting to items on council's current agenda. So, public speaks comes before we vote. We are the legislative body of the city. We do not deal in courts. We don't deal in hiring and firing outside of our office. Our authority is very different. It is on passing ordinances that are on our agenda. As long as we have had a forum that allows the public addressing us at our meeting to be on anything, it implies that we have control. And a significant amount of things that we have heard have absolutely not only nothing to do with the city, they don't have to do with our body. We are narrow and restricted in what we have authority to do. And so when the public comes to talk to us, public speaks, the spirit of public speaks is about the items that are on the agenda that are in front of us at this time. It will affect residents, it will affect people, do business in the city or not the city. And then we should be able to hear for it, if they're against it, how it will affect them, so they can influence the way that we deal with these issues. That's the spirit of public speaks. And when we moved it to the end of the meeting, one of the concerns of doing it is it's after the vote. So it's in this app, when we did the landlord registration fee, people came to speak to us about an issue that we were taking action on that was going to directly affect them. It was moved to the end, they were unable to address that by the time they voted. And so we had to postpone that vote, so we can't go ahead and say. So I think it's more appropriate wording than say business. Please. The same that, yeah.
That's the interesting thing, is because, not I shouldn't say that, but it's easier to see what items are on your agenda. And if there's something that is absolutely not related, city business is a very nebulous term, because if I live in the city and I'm upset about something, even if it doesn't represent that city business, I'm your constituent, you know, and when you start to have to parse that out, and we talk about this, and they start out one way, and then another way. You know, so it's a very, very difficult thing. And we've had certain things that probably should have been covered, that were just wildly stray. It would have to be, and, you know, we try to move things within purview. I think you can have an agenda, right?
They have, so Columbus has restrictions on things in the front committees. Some only allow you to address council work depending about what's on that agenda. There's a lot of other cities are much more narrow with these things. And they do it because public speaks about what council, what their authority is, what they're about to do on, and how it's going to affect people in the city, outside, and in the city as business in the city. I have tried to do for the borders on city business. It's not easy because a police issue that happened in 1970 in the city, it says city business. It probably is. It's hard to say. Or if something did happen in the city, they could public speaks can sometimes go to city stuff, not city stuff, city stuff, not city stuff. So it's not an objective, it's not a thing. It's very subjective. And this would make it when you would outline, when you sum up the item that is on the agenda that you were served with. And that's what we would say. with the department that can solve it for them to get it solved, and then we make sure that that resident's concern is solved.
I don't believe we do. I believe that we contact that department on their behalf and we facilitate everything all the way through.
But that is, I
So
guess,
in their eyes,
yeah.
in their eyes, we are the one that filled that time. In their eyes,
So
we are the one that
yes,
got.
but we are serving as a liaison. Yes.
See what I'm saying?
No, I think it's a semantics over words. I think we're saying the same thing. The liaison part of this is that we connect with a service that they and but that is outside of the legislative authority that we do on Monday night. And we say the same thing. Our Monday nights are ceremonial. Our real work is Tuesday through Sunday. When we are putting people in contact, or we're getting information necessary to solve the problem. Yeah. It's the voting process. It's the legal. It's the legal work that we do that makes it official. But Tuesday through Sunday, to your point, it's the looking at is this a good thing or bad thing? It is. I have a resident that has flooding on the street, and I need to get it to Chris Barnes, and he can go out and look at it, so he can start working on the thing and fill them in on the progress of
So you're something like public speakers got signed up. How are we doing that before we start reading? Talk about it.
Yeah, so if you have the sign-up sheet where they can, well,
Sometimes you can, sometimes you
No,
can't.
we meet there, meetings, the 5 to 7, we meet 2 minutes. I don't need to tell them.
so I would say that if we're not able to get to them on Monday night, we can, if we have a form where if you, similar to
He signed up for public speaking.
yeah, but if we have a sign-up sheet that says, do you have a problem with the city? Put your name, your address, the problem that you're having. Either Lee or Jill and the girls can reach out to them and say, I'm gonna have, you
just know who to call about.
So she reaches out to
So
the
she
full
reaches
council.
out to me, so
Because
I
you're the
can go
liaison.
on.
Yeah.
But
That's
see,
what we go.
that's my point
But
though.
I also get what John's saying, I'm not the one that's gonna fill those cards.
Correct, but you didn't refer her to somebody else. You handled.
No, I
you
guess-
took- You took care
so
of her
Frank,
situation.
I
So
don't-
that woman's
I
fine.
tell anybody, well, don't call me, call me.
Right, but that woman's fine. Rob Fisher took care of that problem.
Well, Frank, that's not what
I know, but
the liaison role is that when somebody has a problem, they don't know who to go to, they go to us, because they know us. They have our numbers, they know where we live. And then we can.
I a lot of times call the people myself, you know, I'll call the road director, and sometimes the problem is so complicated, I actually say, no, you need to talk to Director Gary. Okay, you need to talk to her.
Yes.
And, you know, I can't, this is pretty high up, so I do go.
Right.
I do go. I do whatever is necessary to try to solve the problem. Whether it's me getting involved or me driving out there, like you have to look and see what we have. Sometimes you have to, because you're not sure what's happening. So, but I do have to go, but I want to just real quick, there's one other little, let's talk about that real quick before I have to leave. There's just one other thought, and these are all just thoughts. I think the earlier rule changes were all things that were kind of straightforward. And these are certainly more things to think about and chew on, and, you know, think about how, but we have one other.
Section B. So 3 minutes is our public speaks amount. I'm a lot. We gave it 2 minutes. So the idea behind 2 minutes is we regularly have where somebody gets to say a minute and a half, and then they start a minute and a half. It's well, you know, what do I talk about? If there is a